In this episode of the Locked On NBA Big Board podcast, we are going to talk about Cooper Flagg in Duke in North Carolina. Why? Because Krysten Peek was there at Cameron Indoor Stadium. I'm a little jealous, but then after hearing her story, maybe I'm not so jealous. So stay tuned. Big shout out to each and every person that has made the Locked On NBA Big Board podcast your first listen of the day. I'm your host, Rafael Barlowe, along with my co-host, Krysten Peek. And Krysten is going to share her thoughts from being live at Cameron Indoor Stadium, not just to see Duke, North Carolina, but Duke, North Carolina with Cooper Flagg. So before we get into this episode, I want to let you know that it is sponsored by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase, and check out the Locked On newsletter. If you are a Mavs fan, check out the Locked On newsletter at LockedOnDaily.com. I apologize for laughing. I'm really trying not to laugh. It's kind of a sad day here in Dallas, but check it out at LockedOnDaily.com. You're a Lakers fan or the Jazz or Spurs, there is a newsletter from Locked On that is a one-stop for ultimate team and league coverage delivered right to your inbox every single day. And with the trade deadline coming up on Thursday, there's a lot to be talked about. And then if you are not subscribed to the Locked On NBA Big Board YouTube channel, please subscribe, like, share, comment, and click the bell so you can be notified every time we drop an episode, because we are coming at you at least 5 days per week. All right, let's dive into this episode. But before we talk about the live scouting at Duke at Cameron Indoor Stadium, it's on my bucket list. I haven't been there, but I plan on going one day. I want to hear where you were and what were your thoughts when you found out that Luka Dončić got traded to the Los Angeles Lakers.
Okay, I was in Durham. I had just finished everything from the game from Duke, North Carolina, the press conference, the interviews, and I'm back at my hotel. I have a 6 a.m. flight leaving Durham to head back to where I live in Las Vegas. And, you know, after a game like that, after an atmosphere like that, just a day, you cannot sleep. Like I just could not just sleep. So I'm just, on my phone, scrolling Twitter, and then I get a notification. I see it's Shams, and Shams says Luka to the Lakers, AD and who else to the Mavericks. And I look at it and I'm like, he has to have been hacked. This is not true. I was the same way with everyone else. So I text a few front office people. I text Shams. I was like, are you hacked? Like I wanted to be like, please send a photo of yourself. And I texted my brother. I was like, this has to be false. Like, this cannot be true. And then when Shams followed up and he said, yes, this is true. And then that just doesn't even feel like Shams. And everyone's like, Shams, we need a video of you confirming this. And then when we saw everything else trickle, I was like, oh my gosh, literally, Rafael, I did not sleep. I was up. That happened at 12:30-ish East Coast time. And I had set my alarm for 4:45 to leave by 5 to get to the airport. I didn't sleep. I was that person that was just like scrolling everything, all the comments on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, whatever. I was texting with front office people. I talked to a few people. I talked to a few front office executives. I talked to scouts, and we were all just in disbelief. And so when the tweets that I put out where I said, listen, I work in high school basketball. You and I both, Rafael, we've seen what's coming up. I don't know one single player as a freshman that warranted just one pick for Luka Dončić. Like that to me, and mind you, I'm not someone that follows the money and everything and every like ESPN does in terms of the cap space and everything. But I don't know what a 2029 future first round draft pick is. Whatever it is, it's not worth Luka Dončić. He, I think, warrants at least 6 picks.
I mean, Gobert went for 5.
Gobert went for what did Mikal Bridges go
around
for?
the same time. De'Aaron Fox just went for 3.
And did you see? Oh my God! Did you see how sad the video was of him landing in LA and walking off the plane and like the photos with Rob Pelinka? He just looks sad. He just looks so sad.
Well, I heard that he just bought a $15 million house last week because his house just got broken into maybe like 2 or 3 weeks ago. And I heard he just bought a $15 million house. And I have a Mavs media pass, and I attend almost every home game. And I'm in the back tunnels. You can just see like the players walking by and the interaction. There was no signs of like people not liking him. He's always been the guy that if I'm talking to a player and he walks by, he tackles the guy and says something. I mean, he's just a big kid. But my story is a little similar in the sense that I was up. I didn't go back to sleep because I was actually asleep when I got the message, and my phone or my watch just kept going off. And I had my son. I didn't want to like wake him up. And I found out when I put my son in the bed and I went to grab my phone, and I saw like the message in all caps, and I didn't think anything of it. So I go to ESPN, not to check and verify if this is true. I go to ESPN to look at the box scores of some of the college games that I fell asleep on. And then that's when I saw it, and I couldn't sleep. I didn't go to sleep until Sunday night. I saw you were up tweeting. I was tweeting too. It was such a unique night in the sense that the whole basketball world was up. Like, I literally sent a tweet. I think if I'm not mistaken, I was kind of half like, I think we were just all in the daze at that point.
Right.
But my tweet was piggybacking off yours, where you said there's not a 29 pick worth it. And so I kind of, being facetious, talked about Eric Dampier Jr. and these ninth graders. I actually wrote an article about it today. Just being facetious because I'm still in shock. I wrote an article today about who are the top ninth graders that maybe could make this trade.
It's not worth it. No. There is no silver lining to any of this. This isn't. We all knew who AJ DeBonsa was when he was in ninth grade. We all knew who the Boozer twins when they were in ninth grade. We all knew who Cooper Flagg was. We all knew who Tyron Stokes was. There is not a freshman in this class that warranted trading away Luka Dončić. I'm sorry. Okay, let's move on.
I'm pretty passionate about it. So my tweet piggybacked yours, right? And I wrote about, I think I mentioned Eric Dampier Jr., Cameron Mercer, so on. And I start getting texts from NBA people. I'm like, it's 4:00 in the morning Central Time. Nobody was asleep. Nobody was asleep.
No.
It's the craziest. I mean, I don't have a comparison to it. I don't have any especially as far as like trade. But anyway, let's talk about the Crazies from Cameron Indoor Stadium. First of all, before we talk about the game, tell me, well, I know because we've talked, but tell the audience about your experience at Cameron Indoor Stadium, and did it live up to the hype?
100%. And I didn't even know what I was getting myself into. I'd been to a couple Duke games, but I've sat in the stands, in the seats where normal people sit. And so now as a member of the media, coming and knowing that I have to sit on press row. And for those that don't know, press row is literally like a table, and your back is against the bleachers, the knees, the legs of the Cameron Crazies that show up 3 hours before the game. And so I didn't know what it was going to be. I talked to a couple of the assistant coaches before the game, and we're sitting there and they're like, "Oh, is this your first Duke UNC game?" I said, "Yeah." And they're like, "Oh, you're in for something." And I'm like, "Okay." And so you see the Cameron Crazies, they're all dressed, they're all painted blue. I got some blue paint in my hair. That's how close you are. And they stand the entire time. And not only do they stand, they are lined up outside Cameron Indoor to try to get the best seats possible. So once they start filing in, they are there as soon as I walk in. I was there 3 hours before tip-off. So they are standing there 3 hours before tip-off, and then for 2 hours during the game, just happy to be there. I don't know if any of them got food. I don't know the deal. Some of them had water. They were like putting water on the table where the press seats were. But once the game started, Rafael, it was insane. I saw that they had earplugs in the press room. I'm like, what is this? Who needs earplugs? And then the game started and I had a headache. I'm just like, it is so loud in here. They're jumping behind you. The Cameron Crazies are jumping on the bleachers behind you. Some of them are falling forward. I was getting hit on my head and my shoulders. They're like bracing themselves. They're falling over, hitting like the table where your laptop is. And it smelled bad. Like, of course, they're sweaty. They smell bad. It was like something I had never experienced ever. And I can only equate it to the time that I decided in college to go to Times Square. I was going to school in New York. My sister came out. We went to Times Square for New Year's and we were packed like sardines in Times Square. And it was awful for the 6 hours that we were there, but the 10 minutes of, right before the ball drops and right after was incredible. That's what I equate being a media member sitting in press row to, right behind the Cameron Crazies during Duke, North Carolina. It's the exact same if you were to one day want to go to Times Square and watch the ball drop.
See, I'm all for it. You know why? Because I've been to EuroLeague games in Europe. I've been to games in Greece. I've been to games overseas where a player shot a three, backpedaled, had his hand up too long. The fans thought he was taunting, and they threw pennies. And, they smoke a lot in Europe. They heat the pennies up with their lighters. They throw hot pennies. I've been hit with water bottles. So I actually kind of like that.
No, but it's not just one time being hit, Rafael. It's like anytime a Duke or anytime a North Carolina player they're doing like they're reaching their hands over you and hitting you and doing this thing. And it's all game. It's so it's for 2 hours. It's jumping up and down behind. Now I feel like I'm like old and like complaining. It was just, you're trying to do your job. And it's so funny because when I was texting you, I was doing it on my computer and like sending you videos and everything. And then after the game, when I was getting up, the two, students behind me were like, sorry, your experience was so miserable. We were reading your text messages. I'm like, what is happening? But I do think it is one of the best rivalry games, one of the best atmospheres as a whole in all of sports. It was insanely loud. All the fans were standing for the majority of the game, even when it got out of hand. And it was just incredible to be there, despite like my little minor, like, don't sweat on me. Your sweat is dripping on my head. Like
that's very, very valid. Like, who wants sweating armpit hair dripping above you?
It's so crazy. It's so crazy.
All right, up next, we're actually going to talk about the game. We got to talk about Cooper Flagg and how Duke just absolutely steamrolled North Carolina. The game was not as close as the score indicated. Stay tuned. All right, before we get into the second segment, let's talk about Game Time, because I want to ask you, are you looking for tickets to your next event, whether it is a concert, a comedy show, or a sporting event? You can find your tickets at Game Time, and it doesn't have to be a headache because Game Time now has Game Time picks. And with Game Time picks, it has never been easier. So let me tell you how it works. With Game Time Picks, the app does all the hard work for you. It curates the best deals, so you do not have to waste time searching through endless ticket listings. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the promo code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, use the redeem code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. All right, second segment. So let's talk about the game. One, I'm still a little envious and jealous because not only did you get to see the best rivalry in college basketball, but you had a chance to see it with Cooper Flagg. Obviously every year Duke is going to have their lottery picks, but Cooper, the Zion Williamsons, that's not every year. So you had a chance to watch Cooper, a player that you know personally. What was it like seeing him in that atmosphere, and just describe what you saw from him on the floor?
With Cooper, we saw this sort of switch after the Christmas break. He talked about it. He told me about it, just in terms of he was able to go home and kind of reset, get back to the basics, and switch his mindset, because the beginning of the season we saw him against Kentucky, against Kansas. He struggled a little bit, but being able to go home to his parents, his grandparents, his brothers, and just have rest and just a mental reset really helped him. And he was cool, calm, and collected. Like, warm-ups were a breeze. I never once saw him take what I've seen before from top players, where they take this like deep breath, because they realize what's at stake. What's this rivalry game? He was just, I am here. And I asked him after the game, kind of about his approach to it. Was he nervous? Like, of course he's nervous, but he said, yes, 100%. The nerves were there, but once I step onto that court, once I'm in between those lines, it just becomes basketball. And he said, I'm able to block out the noise. I'm able to work with my teammates, and we just got in a rhythm and we didn't look back. And that completely showed on the court, like from start to finish. Rafael, he damn near had a triple double, and it wasn't even look like he was trying. Like, I thought Kon Knueppel was the star, quote unquote, of the night. That just goes to show you how good Cooper was to start the game, to give them that edge and that lead.
Yeah, 21 points, 8 rebounds, 7 assists. He was 6 of 14 from the floor, but he was 3 of 5 from 3. He just had a game that we are expecting from him. And then I forgot to mention, he had 5 stocks. He had 3 steals and 2 blocks. Just, ho hum, another day at the office. And then Kon Knueppel had a really strong game, 22 points. To me, I think this was, North Carolina's not ranked. They're 13-10.
Yeah.
But this was a big game. And one of the knocks I've had on Knueppel is that he's had some games against some of the better competition where he hasn't shot the ball particularly well. But today was an exception. Again, I know North Carolina is not Kansas or some of the top schools, but it's a rivalry. You have to throw the record out regardless.
Right.
And he was 7 of 11 from the floor, 2 of 4 from 3. Got to the foul line 7 times. Also had 5 rebounds and 5 assists. Did you see anything from Kon that like really caught your attention?
I would say, the thing that I saw from Kon, because remember I saw him in the Kansas game, the Kentucky game early on in the season, and he looked a little timid. He was way more vocal on the court. He was way more interactive with his teammates. And John Shire, he echoed that in the post-game press conference, where he said that Cooper and Kon, they have this tendency to check themselves in the game, where they're learning to play in terms of encouraging one another, but also checking one another. And Cooper has told him in past games, hey, you need to shoot that ball. And Kon has told Cooper, hey, you can switch on this defender. Like, they're always checking each other, which I think is giving them kind of this competitive edge as freshman leaders on this team. I think the rest of the players are sort of falling in suit behind Kon and Cooper and taking that leadership approach. And so to see that growth from Kon is really encouraging. And he just shined on, one of the biggest stages in college basketball.
All right, I have to ask it. You were there. What were your thoughts when you saw North Carolina roll out 4 players, 6'4" or smaller against Duke? Like, and before you answer that, how in the world does North Carolina, a school with resources in this NIL era, not have any bigs? It's a 2-part question.
So that is the biggest conundrum. I'm trying to wrap my head around the fact that North Carolina went out and got oh my gosh, why am I blanking on his name? The Patriots coach for their football team.
Bill Belichick.
North Carolina goes out and they get Bill Belichick, but they do not have the resources to get AJ DeBonsa in the recruiting realm, or to go out in the portal and get some size in the front court after you lose Armando Bacot. That I don't understand that reasoning. And so I think when North Carolina, when Hubert Davis was like, okay, we're just going to throw whatever we can at them. And so they threw all the guard power. They were trying to speed up the game. Problem is, when you look at Duke's front court with Cooper, with Kaman Malawach, they can run the floor. They were running the floor fine. So that was a shot misfired for North Carolina. And, they never led in the entire game. So it was just start to finish. Execution and preparation for the Duke Blue Devils was insanely impressive. And, John Shire said before the game on College Game Day, when asked what is more stressful, as a player playing in this rivalry, as a coach, what's more stressful? And he said, well, as a player, it's very stressful because you have to know what your assignment is. As a coach, when you're coaching this rivalry, you have to make sure that every single player on your team knows their assignment. So it's a different dynamic. But when I heard that and when I saw the execution, that rang true. It's like every single player on that team knew what their assignment was and they executed perfectly.
Yeah, I was just blown away because Duke is bigger than some NBA teams.
Yeah.
You got CN James is like 6'6", 220. Tyrese Proctor's like 6'6". Kon is 6'7". Cooper's 6'8", 6'9". And then Malawach is 7'2". So North Carolina decides to counter with, we're going to start 6'4" Ian Jackson at the 4. So,
right.
At one point, I thought they were going to get beat by 40. North Carolina did kind of make it somewhat respectable, but Duke had their foot all the way off the gas. And I just wonder, like, how does North Carolina not have a big? Right. Like, go get, he was expensive. Oumar Ballo. Some of these other bigs that went for a lot of money could help better than starting a 6'4" guy that I think his NBA role is going to be a combo guard. You can't start 6'4" at the 4. But it was just a big contrast between a big team and a small team, and it went exactly how you expected it to go. All right, up next, we're going to talk a little bit about the players from North Carolina, the freshmen that are on draft boards, and Ian Jackson and Drake Powell. But I also want to talk about Tyrese Proctor, who had a really strong performance. Basketball season is heating up, and there is not a better way to get in on the action than with Prize Picks, which is the best place for daily fantasy sports. There's over 10 million members, and they've awarded billions in winnings, and Prize Picks makes it easy and fun to turn your sports knowledge into real money. All you have to do is just pick more or less on at least 2 player projections, and if you're right, you can win up to 1,000 times your cash. For example, this week I'm looking at taking more on Jason Tatum for points and more on assists for LeBron James. And the best part, Prize Picks keeps it simple. You can make your selections in 60 seconds or less. It is fast, it is secure, and you can get your money quickly when you win. So download the app and use the code LOCKEDONNBA to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONNBA to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks. Run your game. All right, last segment. Let's start with Tyrese Proctor. Proctor had one of his best games of the season, in my opinion. He's a player that I was extremely high on his freshman year, and it seems like so long ago because he played with Derek Lively and Kyle Filipowski, and this is a totally different team. But I was really high on him. Got off to a slow start his freshman year, then he turned it on, showed flashes as a shot maker. Then you see that he's not necessarily the point guard, doesn't have the ball handling duties, but he's made a jump this year. And against North Carolina, he had 17 points, was 5 of 10 from the floor, 2 of 5 from 3. What are your thoughts on Proctor overall, and how do you see him as an NBA prospect?
For Tyrese Proctor, this is what I'll say about this game specifically. He was the very first Duke player out on the court. He came out with his headphones on an hour and a half before tip. He was the first player on the court, even before North Carolina came out. Ian Jackson was the first player for North Carolina who came out for warmups, but he came out and it looked like just straight business. And he was going through his shooting drills. He was picking his spots. And anytime that he made a string of shots in a row, he kept going back there. And I think in his mind, he's like, this is where I'm going to hit my shots. And to his credit, in the games, when the shots were on the line, those were the shots that he was making. So to see that sort of maturity and acknowledgement in his game of being very he was proactive and trying to prepare for this game was really good to see. The other thing I will say about him is when I saw him in person, this is the first time not the first time, because I've also seen him against Kansas and also Kentucky, but he is so skinny, Rafael. He is not really added a lot of weight to his frame than what we saw as a freshman and sophomore year, but he's so long and but he's so skinny. Like I want to feed him like 10 cheeseburgers when I see him, but he uses his frame very well. His shot creation is getting better. And like you said, this was a very surprising game, a very good game for him. And I don't know where he stands on NBA draft boards. I think, like you said, when he was a freshman, a lot of us were super high on him. I think that is echoed from NBA front offices. I don't know what his draft trajectory is, either this year or next year. Because, as you stay in college and you get older, that window closes a little bit more. But what he's doing this year, I think if he had done his freshman year is what NBA scouts would love to see.
Well, his freshman year, I remember he missed like his first 28 or 29 threes. I mean, it was just a brutal start. And then you started hearing people say, well, maybe he should not reclassified up. And so then he finished strong at the end of the year. And I mean, the numbers won't show it, but he ended up shooting like 32% from three. But he had dug himself in such a big hole. And if you remember in their NCAA tournament game against Tennessee, he looked like the only one that could score. And he showed flashes of shot making. So I thought he was a top 10 pick coming into a sophomore year. And he just didn't make a big jump, the jump that you expected as a freshman, from his freshman to sophomore year. And I've always felt like, maybe not this year, but in the past couple of years, I felt like Duke's pieces didn't always fit. Like I didn't think the Lively, Filipowski, Mark Mitchell front line, I didn't think they complemented each other. And Duke took off his first year, I think, when they gave him the keys to the offense and started him at the point, if I'm not mistaken. Again, didn't make the jump as a sophomore. The numbers, I mean, they got better by like a point, but it wasn't like a significant jump. But if you look at him as a junior, the numbers are still pretty much the exact same. I mean, freshman year was 9.4 points per game. Sophomore year is at 10.7, but he's shooting 38% from three on 5 attempts per game. But the big difference that I saw from this game that I haven't seen much of his career is he got to the foul line. Like my knock on him is that he can't finish at the rim, can't really blow by guys. And some of his finishing issues at the rim is because he's like listed at a $183.
Right.
6'6". I mean, he can hula hoop through a Cheerio, even though I think Isaiah Evans is even skinnier. But he got to the foul line 5 times. So I was impressed with his ability to get to the charity stripe.
Yeah, but we talked about, you say that for this game, but we look at the size discrimination or the size discrepancy from North Carolina. I would hope that he would be able to get to the foul line and finish through guys like Ian Jackson.
Yeah.
So that's me playing. That's me playing the devil's advocate. But yes, he did have a very, very good game, Tyrese Proctor.
And he's going to need to at least. I mean, I think NBA scouts, they know that he can be a complimentary player. They're going to like the size as far as 6'6" and the ability to play on or off the ball and shoot. But if he can get downhill and prove that he can bring more to the table, like if his shot isn't falling, I think that would help his draft stock. All right, let's switch sides to North Carolina. Ian Jackson, prior to maybe about a week and a half ago, you could say that he was one of the hottest players in the country. He has cooled off. And so I was hoping like even though I thought Duke was going to win, but I was hoping this could be a game where we could see Ian get hot and get buckets, because when he's hot, he's one of the best scorers in the country. But he's on a slump. In his last 2 games, he hasn't reached double figures. But he had a streak of games where he was getting 26, 25. What were your thoughts on Ian? And do you think just Duke's size and him playing out of position impacted him? And also, I mean, North Carolina has lost 4 out of their last 5 games. So I imagine, it's Chapel Hill is not the best place to be right now.
Yeah, for Ian Jackson, I mean, he, like I said, he was the first player out on the court for North Carolina, and he is trying to warm up. He's not wearing any headphones, so he's trying to warm up with the Cameron Crazies. I took a video of this, yelling at him every single time he shot the ball. And you saw Ian kind of chuckling, like anytime he missed, it was just you thought the game was going on, just the amount of boos that were happening, and you saw Ian just kind of smile a little bit. So I don't know if the pregame got in his head a little bit, because we've seen him. He is a deadly scorer. He is a deadly shooter. Some of the things, I was sitting right there, Rafael, some of the things the Duke fans were screaming at Ian Jackson were horrible. They were horrible. And in a game, like, it's hard not to hear those things. Mm-hmm. If I hear them and Ian is right in front of me taking the ball out of bounds, I 100% know that he hears them. And so when you look at that sort of like territory of the rivalry, you're in, the opposing team's territory, like their zone, you have to be able to block that stuff out and be able to turn it on. And we didn't see that. I don't think we saw that from anybody from North Carolina. Like, from start to finish, like you said, Duke just did not let off the gas. They were go, go, go the entire game. And yes, they only lost by 18. It could have been 30, 35, I think, that they could have lost by. And we're going to see the game again. They're going to run it back the last game of the season. What is it? March 5th at North Carolina. I think we'll see a few of the freshmen like Ian Jackson, like Drake Powell, kind of settle a little bit more, because they're not in that territory with the Cameron Crazies, trying to play the mental game and get into their head. So it was disappointing for me to see that for Ian and both Drake. I mean, I had a scout. They said, "Oh, how did Drake look?" And if I am completely honest, like, my response was, I couldn't even tell you when he was on the court, except
at the end.
The end. He was great. He was great. Yeah. He was great in the first half. Yeah, I wouldn't even be able to tell you when he was on the court. The end of the game, you did see him start to do a few things. Yes.
And he looked like he was just so far behind physically when he was out there. I mean, other than Proctor, I mean, seeing James is rock solid. Kon is, he just looked like he was a freshman while they looked like they were grown men. I want to talk about Ian again. So North Carolina has lost 4 of their last 5 games. And North Carolina, their success is going to be heavily dependent on Ian Jackson. They lost against Stanford. He was 1 of 8. They lost against Wake Forest. He was 3 of 11. They won against Boston College. He was 8 of 13 with 19 points. And then against Pitt, they lost. He was 4 of 10 from the floor. And against Duke, he was just 2 of 6. Their best streak, when they won against UCLA, and I mean, Campbell doesn't count, but Notre Dame, SMU, NC State, and Cal, Ian Jackson was averaging over 20 a game. And their next matchup, which is in Chapel Hill, North Carolina could be fighting for their NCAA tournament hopes. I mean, they're already like a long shot to make it right now,
right,
just because of the ACC. But that game could have even more implications.
Yeah, I think for Ian and both Drake, I mean, this is now, I hate to say it, like it's no longer, sort of like, what can we do for the team? It's now turned into, what can we do personally to show NBA scouts and executives that we're ready to come out?
Uh-oh.
Is that a hot take? I don't know.
No. I wouldn't say it's a hot take, but if you look at Powell's numbers, just if you didn't watch the game, you just look at the box score, you say, well, he was their best player because he was 5 of 8 from the floor. He had 12 points in 22 minutes, but they all came. I shouldn't say all. The only ones I remember came when the game was decided, when North Carolina cut the lead from like 30 to like 20.
Right.
That's when he scored his points. But I was high on Jackson. I think in my last mock, after he had that streak where he maybe had like 6 or 7 games, we scored over 20 in a row, 20 points. I thought like, okay, lottery range. But now he's cooled off, and I don't know what to do with Drake Powell.
I don't know either. And I'll say this about Drake. He was absolutely fantastic at Nike Skills Academy in front of a lot of decision makers that were there. And so to see that, and then you go to the wrong situation at North Carolina, you're not getting a lot of touches. You're getting defensive assignments that you're not going to get necessarily in the NBA. Is this just a throwaway year? And then you wait to see what he does in pre-draft process. But I do know there are teams that absolutely still like Drake Powell.
Yeah, and I believe it. He's 6'6", 195. There are teams that like him for his defense. I think his offense is underrated, but the fit at North Carolina is not allowing him to really show what he can do, just flashes. Obviously, I think he should test the waters. I think he has a really, really interesting decision, unless he just finishes strong the rest of the season. But I think as of now, can't say he's a lock as a first-round pick. And the buzz that he has, a lot of it is still based off of how well he played at the Nike Skills Academy, because everybody was absolutely raving about his performance there. Well, that wraps up this episode of the Locked On NBA Big Board podcast. Once again, it's Rafael and Krysten, and we are out of here.